And
Hey, everybody, look who I have here with us for this Boston New Technology Fireside Friday conversation. We have the one and only Marita McGinn, who has done so many different things in so many different places all throughout our beloved Boston startup community. So, as always, what this is all about is shining a light on a special person and their contributions to the ecosystem. Marita's done a lot. We're going to talk about a lot of cool things today, everything from robotics to how the industry as a whole in startups has changed over the years and all the exciting things that are to come. But without further ado, I'm actually going to hand it over to Marita here at the top. And Marita, great to have you join us today.
yeah, thank you so much. This is a wonderful way to end the week. It's Friday morning, and
Yeah,
I'm having a really fun time so far. So thank you for having me join. Yeah, happy to get started in whatever way you'd like.
that's awesome. Thank you so much for being so accommodating as always.
There-
Yeah, fun fact for everybody listening, one of the first ways in
yeah,
which
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, no, you go. Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you were asking me for a fun fact.
Oh no,
Go,
please.
you
We
say
love
your
fun
fun
facts.
fact.
Oh, okay. So I'll do mine first, and
Well,
we'll.
sure.
This is great. I love this. So I'll be very brief. So basically, the way you and I met, as you know, was during Prepare for VC's very first online summit that we did, the Venture Forward Summit. What feels like forever ago, and I still look back on the panel discussion that you were a part of as being one of the most informative ones like we've ever done. And I remember back in those days, we really wanted to provide something so educational, and everybody actually still a lot of our core community members are like, I remember that chat with Marita. That was really, really nice. And she did such a great job moderating. But luckily, you don't have to worry about moderating now. I'll take care of that. And you'll be able to just sit back, relax, and tell us some stories. But let's hear your fun fact
I think
first.
that sounds wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
I remember that panel as well, and I really enjoyed it. One thing I care a lot about is helping founders with understanding all different types of fundraising. And in that conversation, we talked a lot about the differences between VC and crowdfunding and going after non-dilutive capital. Really cool. But so I know that was kind of funny, but my fun fact, let's see. So the thing that pops to mind is I live in Salem, Massachusetts, and I just finished a really big Halloween season. And a fun fact that I learned about Salem 2 days ago was we had a record year this year. We had 1.2 million people come and visit in October, even though we're a town of 50,000. So it's
Crazy.
back to a ghost town today. It's really nice, but yeah. So I love Halloween. That's my fun
But
fact.
the whole ghost town thing takes on a different dimension at a certain time of year where it's not necessarily a
It
ghost town we
certainly
understand.
does.
Yeah. I have a
Oh,
lot of friends.
100%.
Exactly. Like I have a lot of friends and family who live out there, and I always love watching like the reels and footage that they send over of everybody on the sidewalks. Like it gets really it's really something. And I
It's
think
really something.
yeah, like with that in mind, I was going to go with the origin story question first, but because you brought up something that once again gives an indication of how much like community means to you in general, but we'll get a little bit more specific. Why? I mean, how would you say you've been able to come into the Boston startup community, right? And what have been some of the highlights that you always think about over the years? And I imagine they're very distinct one from the other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I am actually from Salem, Massachusetts. I moved back right before COVID. So I was living in Chicago and New York City for a while. I've always been involved in startups for the past 10 years. But I got back involved in Boston to be a part of the Air Force accelerator and powered by Techstars. And that was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And it was a kind of introduction to how small and engaged the Boston startup community is. And I say small because it just feels very comfortable. And, even just 2 days ago, I was at an event that JP Morgan was putting on, and I ran into so many familiar faces. And I think that's something that's unique to Boston. I could only last a year and a half in New York City. It just wasn't the right vibe for me. And it was also a part because I couldn't find the right community. I think there's a lot of pockets of startups in bigger cities like New York and Chicago, but in Boston, it just feels like a place that's extremely welcoming to all people. And it's just a wonderful way. Like it feels nice to be working alongside friends, and I think that's kind of the thing that's unique to Boston. Um, and one of the questions that you had shared with me earlier was like, what's a time that you facilitated valuable connections between entrepreneurs and resources? And there's just one person I really want to give a shout out to. So there's a company called Private Packs. They are oh, hey, Jason, welcome. They are a company that's built for women. They basically have like a cooling and heating pad for women to use, like if they have period pain or anything like that. And I met Susan when I lived in New York City about 5 years ago now. And she and I worked together when she was launching her business and she was trying to gain access to capital. So we did an Indiegogo campaign. And she's just like overall an amazing human. She was completing chemo while she was trying to build her startup. And she was just an amazing individual. And I learned recently that she's actually a part of the Techstars JP Morgan group now. And now, after Techstars, she's at CVS. She's doing great. We keep in touch. And I only mention that because like I feel like there's ecosystem builders all across especially the East Coast, but it's just really wonderful to see like New York and Boston working together. And yeah, so I just really appreciate the community.
We've seen more and more of that overlap or bridge building between, our traditional rival in some other ways, New York. I mean, uh, but what's really interesting about what you said is I share your affinity for the following. I feel like, when I first became a part of the startup community, I entered into it by virtue of necessity. It's a story I always tell of how I was working for my dad because we were also caregiving for my mom. And I had the
Mm-hmm.
best of times being given opportunities by people like Jason, for example, through like startup grind to really get to know the scene, but also gain access to like very valuable knowledge and resources in a very comfortable way. I like how you're kind of laid emphasis on that too, that there's this comfortability um, to Boston where, I mean, certainly we're not perfect, but the one thing that I think we succeed at doing really well is like, especially for the early stage founders, making sure that they understand that you're not on this journey all by yourself. And I can give you a very specific example of when you and I met, but it was very indirectly. So this also has to do with Boston New Technology. So Boston New Technology, back when I
Mm-hmm.
was just a member, used to regularly highlight the AFWorks program too. And when they used to have events over at like Federal Reserve and other places, like I used to go because BNT would provide like a discounted ticket, something like that. And that's a great example because being able to have this web of like connectivity of like go to this event, go to that event, get to meet this person, get to meet that person. It's really wonderful. And I mean, would you say that, especially like post pandemic reality, like would you say things have changed much in that way, or has it sort of stayed the same culturally, but now we're doing different things technologically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think at the end of the day, everyone, even especially throughout COVID, is they're looking for the same things, right? We wanted to be together and have that connectivity, but it was just built in a different way. Um, I'm actually really pleased with how it all went. I during COVID, I was in the middle of running a Techstars program, so we had about 6 weeks together, and then maybe 8 weeks apart, and it was virtual. And we just, everybody evolved and changed, but I I think people are having an amazing re engagement in working together again. I'm certainly enjoying that, but because of COVID, like I love working from home. I'm in my home office right now, and it's really nice to be able to do things like this virtually that are still impactful and fun and educational, but we can do it, from our homes. So I really hope that that part of COVID kind of remains because we're all getting really good at it.
Yeah, and it also allows us to sort of it also allows us to bring other communities along with us. I mean, for example, Boston New Technology, we're called Boston New Technology, but our population is very diverse. I mean, we have people, tuning in from different states in the US, different parts of the world, and we want to spread our message of inclusion. We want to spread our message of collaboration, to all these different parts and places. And my next question would be, with what you're doing now with Mass Robotics, I mean, first of all, take us through that transition. Like, what's it been like, and what are you most excited about as you step into your new role? Let's talk robots.
Yeah, well, totally. Well, I'll give you a little kind of backstory of what I've been up to for the last couple of months too, because I think that's an important part of what it's just I'll mention it. So I was working at SVB for a year and a half, and then of course SVB had its collapse. I stayed until June, and then I actually quit my role in June 1st, and I took the entire summer off. And it was the first time in my whole adult life that I didn't have a job, and I just was able to focus on having a good time and really enjoying the New England summer. So for anyone listening to this who's considering, am I able to take a break? Should I take a break? I'm a huge proponent for trusting your gut and doing what's best for you. And for me, that was enjoying my whole summer. So that was wonderful. Um, and then, so about a month and a half ago, I joined Mass Robotics. And for those who are not familiar with Mass Robotics, we are an independent nonprofit that works with robotic startups. We have an innovation hub, a physical space in the seaport of Boston, where about 85 startups work to build their robotics companies. So we have a kind of technical co-working space, but then also a full prototyping lab for basically any tool imaginable for a robotic company. My job at Mass Robotics is building out our first ever Mass Robotics accelerator. So there's a couple of reasons I'm very excited about this program, and kind of the reason I decided to say yes and join the team is the fact that the accelerator is equity free. So that means we're not taking any equity in the companies that are selected, but because of our amazing partner, Mass Technology Collaborative, we're able to fund each of the 10 startups with $100,000 of non-dilutive funding. So it's a pretty unique accelerator because every other accelerator out there takes at least 6 to 8% of a company's equity. And I just feel like at this particular moment, it's really important to give free resources, free, really valuable resources to startups. So yeah, I'll kind of stop there, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the program or what we're up to.
Sure. And I also want to, just in case Jason wants to ask any questions, I know he's been really primarily about the robots. He loves the robots, as do I. But
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
who doesn't? I mean, I'll actually tell you a little bit of a funny aside. I think, Jason, didn't you go to a couple of robotics events and you were sharing all about like their demos, like all the little robots walking around and stuff?
Oh yeah, and then there was even one I wasn't officially going to, but then I was in Seaport and I saw the Boston Dynamics robot walking down the street, and then it was like part of one of the robotics summit events, and kind
Oh,
of went
was
over
this
to check it out a bit.
recently?
Yeah, this
Was
was like
it
a couple months ago, or a month or so ago.
cool? We missed each other then because I was there too. So that was Robo Boston, and that
Yeah,
is the annual event that Mass Robotics puts on every year. So it's like this big STEM event. It's free to the public, and yeah, we had a robot parade. So the Boston Dynamics dogs, a bunch of high schools, and then even the lieutenant governor she was our kind of lead of the parade. So it was pretty awesome. That was
oh
my
yeah,
first week actually at Mass Robotics.
oh awesome.
Yeah, yeah. But the robot thing is so much fun. Like there are robots walking around all of the halls of Mass Robotics, and it's pretty awesome to walk through and just see like what people are actually making. It's pretty impressive.
I mean,
Right.
that ties into what I was going to ask next, which would be, what was your, because it's such an interesting field, right? Like robotics, and robotic startups are some of my favorite like emerging tech verticals. But what was your why, like getting into the whole role, like the whole situation. Like when you were considering this opportunity, what made it so compelling that you're like, with everything else that I've done in the startup world, now I want to transition more towards the robotic side of things?
Yeah, totally. So my whole career has been spent working with early stage startups, but for the most part, I've been in a generalist role. So working with all sorts of different industries, business models, but everything's been on the early stage. And when Joyce and Tom, they're the two, Tom is the executive director and Joyce is one of the co-founders of Mass Robotics. They told me about this role earlier this summer, and I just was really hoping it would work out. This is actually the type of work that I imagined myself doing right out of college. So I had an amazing first job where I got to organize startup competitions across the country. And one of my favorite moments was actually bringing 100 companies to San Francisco for a big pitch competition. And it was my first moment. I think it was when I was still in college. So I think it was maybe 20 or 21. And it was my first moment of really spending a lot of time with entrepreneurs. And I just totally was hooked on working with founders. They're really fun, they're interesting, they're engaging, they're passionate people. And I just always knew that I wanted to be in a supporting role. When I was younger, I thought I would be a startup founder, but now I think I really want to be a supporter of startups. And for a long time, I've been looking for a place that I can really kind of sink my teeth in and enjoy. And Mass Robotics is a place I've always really admired. And this is the type of work that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I appreciate that Mass Robotics is a nonprofit. It's the first time I've ever worked at a nonprofit, and like really the mission is to advance robotic startups. That's it. So it's a really cool place to be because there isn't another bottom line. The bottom line is being a helper, and that's what I think I'm really good at. So, and the other piece too, I had wanted to sector specialize for a long time. I have a particular flavor of working with technical founders. I think they're really fun. And I don't come from a technical background. I have a business background. So I think like me being a supporter to technical founders just feels really good. And I know I can have a bigger impact in that way.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that because, our Boston New Tech community is full of tech founders, and I'm sure they would really appreciate that compliment. I certainly agree with you too. I,
Yeah.
I think it's specifically really cool when you can work with a tech founder and get them to see the power of their story and like really bringing everything to the ground because when things first start out, especially at the ideation phase, it's all like lab work, whiteboard work, like coming up with the code, coming up with the blueprints. But then like when you're able to
Mm-hmm.
have them like vision out like the great potential of the product, the service, the whatever, the impact especially. That's so special and similar to you. Like, for a long time, I tried different things in the startup community. I mean, I'm kind of going back in this way. I'm kind of going back to my roots because I've always loved talking to people and I've always loved writing. I think it was pretty much the first thing that I tried adding value with when I joined the community. But in terms of being a supporter, yeah, I think there's something very special to be said about that because when you work with founders, they end up teaching you, not just you, like, being able to render them a valuable service. It's really a mutual exchange of value. And over the years, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah, please go right ahead. Yeah, on
Oh
that
no,
note.
I just love everything you're saying. Yeah, I think it's yeah, like once you figure out, like, I'm almost 30. When I was 20, I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. But now I'm like, okay, my skill sets really are more so connecting people and being like a strong executor of projects, which is what I'm doing now. And it's just a nice moment where I like that you said you're going back to your roots because that's exactly how I feel. Um, and like one thing I'm really pumped about for the program that we're putting together is I want to be able to help technical founders realize that they can be very strong business people, and a technical founder can be a very strong CEO. Oftentimes in super technical people, you'll see that they want to stay close to the tech, or and if they do, that's okay. But I'm hoping that the founders that come into the Mass Robotics accelerator feel like they have been bolstered with enough business acumen to really be strategic business leaders, in addition to amazing physicists or roboticists or PhDs. So yeah, it just is feeling really good.
Very cool. I also want to give Jason an opportunity if he has any questions he wants to ask.
Yeah, I think one of the first like robotics companies I really followed was or I was working kind of as a co-founder in a crowdfunding, basically a company analyzing the crowdfunding space, and there was a startup called Nightscope, which I think is still now a pretty successful like robotic startup. But like what was interesting was, or they had basically mall patrol robots, and their business model, at least at the time, was like having an hourly wage for the robot. So I thought that was like really interesting. Like what kind of either business models or like exciting, things that you wouldn't normally think about with robots have you seen?
Great question. I love the hourly wage for robots. That's really interesting, and like humanizing them in a way that's pretty fascinating. Um, that is cool. I'll have to look them up. What are they called again?
Nightscope.
Nightscope. Okay,
I
I'm gonna
popped the
look
link
them
in
up.
the chat. So
Oh, cool. I'm gonna look them up. So over the past month, I've gotten to meet a ton of robotics companies building at Mass Robotics. There's one in particular that I'm going to mention just because I think what they're doing is really fascinating. And this is a perfect example of a technical founder being like an amazing CEO. The company is called Glidance, and what they are building is a product called Glide. It's a robotic walking cane for people who are vision impaired or are blind. And I've actually used it. I've walked around the halls of Mass Robotics with my eyes closed, and it basically feels like you're walking alongside a guide dog. And when I first came to Mass Robotics, we talked a lot about, awesome, thank you for putting that in there. We talked a lot about like what makes a company at Mass Robotics successful, because we are a nonprofit. We're not only looking for companies that are going to have like incredibly huge ROI. So when I first met Glidance, I was thinking like, oh, this is probably a smaller market than I fully understand. But then the founder, Amos, was at Robo-Business a couple weeks ago. It's a big robotics conference out in California. And I got to hear his pitch, and he had a VC ask him, hey, like, seems like a pretty small market, like pretty niche. And he had an incredible answer where he basically shared with us that only 2% of all people who are blind actually use a walking cane. It's something that affects a huge number of people. And I was just so impressed with his ability to talk about the business uses and also the massive market that he's building within his company called Glided. So it was just awesome. And I'm loving seeing technologies at Mass Robotics that are like truly like game changing. And like, I know SaaS can be game changing, but it's different when you like are walking, when you're using a product that will literally change someone's life. It's just really cool. So I think it totally fires me up.
Yeah, I mean, I have that privilege myself with Boston New Technology, because one of our staples is doing like startup showcases. So we'll be doing one on December 14th. We're going to be incorporating a lot of cool elements and activities, but one of those is going to be the showcase where we invite up to 10 companies from all over the tech startup scene to like, demo their products. And when you work with them beforehand to sort of like get their pitch down and that kind of thing, and they let you in on the vision, the mission, the values. I mean, I've always loved that part of my work, because it's not only like an inside look, it's also like being able, to your point, to appreciate like how they're trying to change the world. There's just something so irresistibly nice about that. Like when you listen to a founder who has that kind of a technology company where it isn't just a shiny technology, it's what is underlying all of that. I mean, and it could be
Mm-hmm.
something as simple as software or it could be hardware like robotics. But when you get to that core, they're like, actually, I'll give you a good example. I was working with a med tech startup a couple of months ago, and like the whole thing was, the guy was saying to me, I'm doing this because I always take my mother to her medical appointments, and she gets nervous whenever she has to like fill out her patient information. So I want to make
Mm-hmm.
it a little bit easier. When I hear this like human side to things, humane side to things with the pairing with technology, it always makes me grateful to be a part of the tech startup community as a whole.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What do you think, Jason? Or were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, I think it's the kind of yeah, the exciting piece is seeing like why people are building what they're doing, and also kind of that transition from I mean, I'm sure this is especially true in the robotic space, like from building this as like what could we innovate, or what's the research side, to what's the actual application that can help millions of people,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we turn this into like a sustainable startup company. Kind of that transition from the idea to the full scale startup is the most exciting part there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like I obviously fundraising for any company is really challenging, and especially when you're, I mean, I know we're at SVB, we talk a lot about the market conditions, right? And it's pretty intense out there, and I'm incredibly impressed by all of these hardware entrepreneurs at Mass Robotics and just in general, like building a hardware product that is capital intensive in an environment that's really challenging to raise money, but still doing it with a smile on your face and like a ton of enthusiasm for what you're doing. And just like, I do garner a lot of inspiration from people like that.
Well, I mean, on that note, I have a really specific question around that, amount of like rigor and challenge. So, from where you're positioned now, what are some of the unique challenges that like robo entrepreneurs or robotic startups are facing compared to some of the other verticals?
Yeah. I mean, so I did a little bit of market research at a recent demo day that Mass Robotics puts on. So twice a year, Mass Robotics puts on a demo day for all of the residents. So about 85 startups, and they'll come. We have investors come, and this so happened to be my first week at Mass Robotics, was our last one. And I went around, and I'm putting together a curriculum for a startup accelerator. So I asked every company, what is the most challenging technical problem you have, and what's the most challenging business problem? And I won't get into the technical stuff, but the business problems are just raising capital and funding what they're doing. Um, the ROI for an investor who's investing in a robotics company, they're probably not going to see any return for at least 10 to 15 years. It's a much, much slower, return to get those funds back. Like it just takes a lot longer. So I think the big challenge right now is having hardware and robotics founders meeting with investors who understand that they're in it for the long haul and they're not going to have a return in 2 years. It just takes way longer, and especially for robotics. I mean, I worked at Indiegogo several years ago, and I worked with consumer hardware companies, so building like all interesting like different types of gadgets, headphones. I'm like looking around my room, like what Indiegogo projects do I have? um, it's totally different when you're building a large scale robotics company. You just need to be finding the right types of investors, and I think that's really challenging. So that's going to be a big part of our accelerator program. We're going to be spending a close to a month really honing in on what investors to work with, how to get them involved, and and how to pitch them.
That's really interesting. I say that because I think, at the end of the day, that ability to find kindred spirits is where it's at when it comes to founders and funders. I feel like a lot of the time, to prevent those, awkward situations, disappointing outcomes, if you're a founder, you're always looking for that funder, that investor who gets what you're doing and is willing to like make sacrifices, just like you're making sacrifices. And on the funder side, I mean, I know there are certain types of investors who, like you said, because of the vertical they're in, but also probably because of other factors, like they're willing to kind of wait things out, sort of make it like a slow burn, versus those that are looking for more of a like expeditious, like I want more of an immediate, like outsized ROI. And would you
Mm-hmm.
say, I mean, I'm also a big proponent of like the interconnected nature of like emerging technology. So what, based on your conversations with, robotics entrepreneurs and their teams, like what level of collaboration do you think is taking place with the other like new technologies? I'm going to name a vertical that you may not have heard of. It's very obscure. Nobody's talking about it these days, but AI, for example.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know what the play is there as well.
That's so funny. By the way, so I'll just say this to put it out there. I'm not a roboticist. We already know that. And I have been spending the last couple of months really learning a lot more about the robotics industry as a whole. And I have to give a podcast a shout out. It's called the Robot Report. And their episode today is literally I haven't listened to it. Too bad I didn't listen to it right before this, huh? But it's all about AI and robots, generative AI and robots. So give them a listen. It's like a part of everyone's business model right now. I think it's going to continue. Oh, cool. Robot report. Thank you. It'll continue honing in. I mean, I think at this particular stage, I don't think any founder should be like baking in particular tools like we have within AI. So like, ChatGPT specifically into the product that they're building right now, because it's just extremely early. But it's been pretty fun to see how companies at Mass Robotics are experimenting with AI. And I'm trying to think of this particular startup that's doing this really well. I mean, it's just early days. It's fascinating to see,
Do you see, or is the robotic space at the point yet where there's like a software side of it, kind of like kind of what Apple's done in the App Store? There's companies creating apps for robots. Is that taking place?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our awesome success stories at Mass Robotics is called Selfie Autonomy. Do you all know that company? They've been around Boston for a little while.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So they started at Mass Robotics, and they actually were a part of my Techstars Air Force program. And what they create is a software layer that sits on top of any sort of robotic arm. And basically, it's a programmable. It makes for a programmable robot arm from anyone. So, like, I don't know, how to program anything, but I could go in and place the robot arm where I want it to go, and Selfie's layer of software on top will teach the arm what to do. So yeah, I would say we actually have about 8 to 10 different startups at Mass Robotics that are building software layers on top of various hardware. And I'll also mention, so a couple of weeks ago, I was out in California at this conference, and I got to listen to the director of innovation at John Deere. And she was one of the keynote speakers at this conference at Robo Business. And it was incredible to learn how John Deere is implementing generative AI into its products. I got to see, a tractor that is completely autonomous and is taking over so much of the work that farmers have to do. So it's pretty fascinating to see how companies, at the startup stage, but also like a huge corporate stage, are working with AI, but also just different layers of software to implement their products is pretty amazing. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
I'm gonna do one of my patented corny things here. So I wonder what kind of traction that a autonomous tractor is going to be able to accrue over time, just like going all across the fields. Jason's like, I'm really regretting. Maybe
Yeah.
you too, Marita. I'm regretting doing this podcast right now. I'm actually gonna flip. I'm gonna flip the script a little bit.
Yeah.
I've never done this before, so you're gonna be the first person in the hot seat. I want you to,
Cool.
yeah. So based off of what you know, this is probably going to be a new segment. So talking about innovation, based off of what you know or have known about Boston New Technology, I mean, what kind of questions do you have for me, like in terms of like how we're, for example, showing up for the community, if we're like, I mean, anything that might be on your mind relative to what you've been exploring?
I think that's a wonderful question. So the one that pops right to mind, because it's one I've been wondering a bit. I know you all, of course, through your blog and just and Steve and Jason from your own just internet presence, especially on LinkedIn. But to kind of get into something we were talking about earlier, like I'm feeling really motivated to get back into events and seeing people. Do you all have any plan for some more in-person stuff in the future?
Yeah, most definitely. So I'll go first, and then I obviously love Jason to contribute as well because we're collaborating on this. So what's been interesting is trying to kind of like what you were saying earlier, strike that balance between taking care of our digital audience and then taking care of our traditional like core community as well as all of the new arrivals on the scene who are craving in-person immersive experiences. So one of the easiest things and the most enjoyable things that we can do is make good on our promise to bring back the showcases. So that's going to happen in
Mm.
December on December 14th, and then from there on out, maybe we'll take like a small winter break, but otherwise, we're going to be getting back into the habit of once a month having a showcase where it does two things. So it gives everybody a chance to come out, have fun, network, have some yummy food and drink, listen to some great startup pitches, maybe learn some new things they weren't aware of before. And it's just such a simple model of success. And then the other thing that you and I spoke about is coming off of our extremely successful cooperation with Techstars Startup Weekend, that idea, in,
Mm.
in a very simplistic way, that idea of creating an opportunity where you combine the elements of like knowledge and community to create a scenario where you have people coming with ideas, then you have people working on those ideas, then you have people showing off those ideas in like a boot camp style or something of that fashion where again they're getting the education but they're also getting that other thing that I know is like really important, which is exposure. Like they're getting exposure to all the important people here to do so many impactful things. Yeah, but with that, I'll put it over to Jason as well.
Mm.
Yeah. No, I think Steve summarized it really well. Kind of the focus here is where you can still like, and one of the things I guess, um, before Steve and I had both been members of Boston New Technology before we joined the organizing team, and I think one of the things we both really enjoyed was that it showcased kind of on the online presence side, newsletters and social media and everything. It was showcasing not just our own events, but what else is going on and what are the other opportunities for the Boston ecosystem. So that's definitely one piece, we've been excited to kind of keep and build up the presence around, is basically providing kind of this ecosystem where all the other organizations that are offering great resources, programs, events are still, part of our Boston New Technology Network and showcase to our
Mm-hmm.
community. And yeah, the other piece, we were excited to kind of build back was I'd say like, yeah, we came on board about like the end of 2021, and first couple months were obviously like a little bit slower getting everybody back in person, but now kind of in-person events are full swing, and September was a super busy month with some events we were doing, the startup weekend, Boston Startup Week in the middle too, and then kind of we took a step back and planned out what the rest of our year would look like, and new exciting events, and kind of what we wanted our future event calendar for 2024 to look like, and having that mix where there's these startup showcase events, there's networking and co-founder matching, and kind of bringing people together in different capacities, and also more of these more intense like hackathon style, and
That's awesome.
Yeah, different places for people to learn and interact with each other.
Last thing I'll add to that.
I think.
Oh, go right ahead, Marita. Then I'll come in at the end.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really appreciate that there is some sort of business applicability, it sounds like, to most of the things that you do, which is great. And people might think I'm like a little bit of a hater here, but I love when there's like some sort of business learning attached to an event. Like, I think happy hours can be fun, but like startup founders are extremely busy, and like while it's fun to like have a drink with someone, like I love that there is an emphasis on learning and like really grasping some sort of like business traction as a part of the in-person stuff that you do, because I just think it's important. So yeah, I love that.
Well, the reason why we do that is not only because we've been in those shoes, it's we know that entrepreneurs out there of every stripe, of every vertical, are extremely busy, like you said, but they've also developed this awareness, especially here in Boston, that look, my time, my energy has got to be better spent. Like my brain and body currency, is one of my mentors always says. I mean, because like you said, you can always go and grab a drink with one of your startup friends, or you can always go for lunch. But from the perspective of an ESO, entrepreneurial support organization, or even an event organizer, like there has to be more meat on the bones, because we understand that our audience, our community, they're taking a bet on us. They're making an investment in us. So therefore, we have to show up with knowledge. We have to show up with resources, and understanding that in making a commitment to us, what we want the outcome for that to be is basically, let's say the event wraps up, right? You have those really cool conversations at the end where people are filtering out of the co-working space or wherever we happen to be. And I love to hear people say, unsolicited, like, you know what? Either I found my people tonight, or I had no idea about this, or did you hear about that? And you can hear the enthusiasm, you can hear the exuberance. And what I love about what you said is that there has to be something sticky. There has to be like a business learning component, because ultimately these are entrepreneurs. These are people that are trying to build their dreams, their businesses to become like really successful realities of what used to basically just be ideas. So I don't think it's really appropriate or fair to just host something for the sake of hosting something. Somebody loses like a valuable half hour, 45 minutes, an hour of their time. And sure, like, maybe they had an enjoyable time, but I guarantee you, because I've been there, at some point they're going to be like, oh, but wait, oh, shoot, wow, look at the time. Like, I could have been doing this, I could have been doing that. Like, so that's like that's our deliverable that we always have to be like diligently focused on. And I can tell you that with things like co-founder matching and career fairs and resource fairs and workshops, I mean, I recently spoke with somebody called Nelly Yusupova about the subject of product velocity, because that kind of thing, there's some tech to it, but as you know, there's also like that velocity component, which leads to like more immediate, like business outcomes of success, like metrics of success. Like that's where it's at for us right now as an organization. And so, like with that in mind, I know we're coming up on like almost 50 minutes here. I want you to be able to explain to people a little bit more about the accelerator program, so that they know how, if they're interested, they can take advantage of it, like when it's going to happen, all the little nitty gritty things, so that they're coming away armed with that information.
Wonderful. and I'll give you a shout out, Steve. One of our first applications is from a founder that you recommended. So thank you very much. That is
In
awesome.
that case, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you know what's really funny about that? So
Yeah, tell me.
I went to the, I know the founder you're talking about, obviously. And as soon as you and I finished speaking, I went and talked to him. When we had our initial conversation a couple of weeks back, I'm like, yo, you have to check this out. It's quite an opportunity. And he's like, actually, I'm meeting her today. I'm like, it's so funny how the world works sometimes. So, yeah.
That is really, really cool. So I am super appreciative to you and to everyone else. I just kind of give a brief overview. So I mentioned kind of the big ticket items at the front of our conversation. So this is the first equity-free robotics accelerator really out there. If someone can find another, please let me know. But I've done a lot of competitive research and I can't find any. So I think it's really special. We are funding each startup with $100,000 of non-dilutive capital. The programming is really built for early stage robotics entrepreneurs. We're not giving like a particular stage. So if you feel like you're early stage, that's good enough for us. The way that fundraising works in robotics is, you could still be very early stage and still have raised, $2-4 million. So we have no fundraising cap. The only hard requirement is that your company needs to be building a hardware focus component or application. So Jason, you had mentioned earlier, talking a little bit about software companies that work with robotics. For this first year, this first cohort, it's going to be hardware companies. And we are breaking our 3-month curriculum into kind of 3 different subjects. So the first is all about listening and learning. So a lot of mentorship from our Mass Robotics community. Second month is all about customer discovery. This is something I care deeply about. My background sales, and especially with technical founders, we want to get them out of the lab and talking to customers. Each company will complete at least 50 customer discovery discussions. So heavy emphasis on talking to customers. Third month is all about fundraising. So lots of VC discussions. We're going to have an investor week, but also we're bringing in industry experts on non-dilutive capital, how to go after SBIRs, STTRs, how to work with the state of Massachusetts, all of that. And it's a real program for technical founders who want to learn how to do business and do it really well. The program begins on February 5th of 2024, and it culminates at an existing amazing conference. It's called the Robotics Summit and Expo. It's going to be on May 2nd of 2024. And it's an amazing conference. It gets at least a couple thousand people. And we're actually going to have our demo day at this conference at the convention center. So really exciting opportunity. The upcoming deadline is our application deadline. So that's November 30th. And for those interested, you can go to massrobotics.org, and there's a page that you can navigate to all about the accelerator, learn more, and apply. I'm also absolutely down to talk to anyone about this accelerator. It's our first time doing it, and it will be a recurring thing that we're really excited about. So I'm in my own listening and learning period. So if someone wants to reach out to me, my email is just Marita, Marita, at massrobotics.org.
Yeah, we'll figure out a way to create some kind of a social call to action. Maybe we'll come up with like a cute little, we have a robotics mascot, if you will, for Boston.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so when I'm thinking
Sweet.
of like, yeah, having that little robotics mascot, like hold a button, like we're going to get our social media manager to design this today, I kid you not, where it's like apply for Mass Robotics, like, accelerator. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, that's awesome. That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously with you, that's a really cool idea. That's a really ingenious idea of having the demo day fold itself into the summit because, I mean, we try to look for the same kinds of opportunities where, it's really trying to bring as many people together, convene them, consciously. But yeah, Jason, I know we're going to be wrapping up here in just a couple minutes, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask Marita any like final questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, my final question. So the robotic icon Steve mentioned, the robot's name is Screwy. Are there any favorite robot names that you've seen so far?
Oh my gosh. Wow, great question. Yeah, okay. So my favorite one is, do you all know Clio Robotics?
Yes.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
They've been around Boston for a long time. The founder, Omar, went through Techstars Air Force program as well, but a couple, not my program that I did, but he's just wonderful. And his whole team works at Mass Robotics. And their product is a drone that has all of the blades kind of in this, they're self-contained. So you can touch the drone. It's not dangerous to be around for people. And they very cutely named it the Dronut. And that's the cutest robot name. Like,
Yeah.
it's really lovely. It was so cute. And yeah, so that's my favorite one,
I'm
Dronut.
almost positive.
But I'll keep you
Yeah,
posted.
I'm almost positive that the drone was also demoed at a Boston New Technology showcase. I'm hoping that we can
I'm
have.
sure I'm sure it was. Yeah. Omar
Yeah,
is everywhere, so probably.
yeah. That is it. Omar Elian, something along those lines. Yep,
Yes.
I remember. I think I was in
That's
the
him.
audience
Yep.
for that, and I think I also saw him at one of
Oh,
the
cool.
AFWorks things. Yeah, the drone on. I love that. So we're going to continue to
Yeah.
keep in close touch with you on the B&T side and all the other ecosystem activities. And Marita, I just want to personally, as a friend and colleague, thank you for making an investment of your time with us today. It's always an absolute pleasure, like speaking with you. I'm so glad Jason was able to join as well. Otherwise, you would have been subjected to just boring questions and more jokes. So he added a lot of value
Oh,
here today as well. But we want to give you the last word. Whatever you want to put out there into the
cool.
wide and wonderful world.
Yeah, well, I greatly appreciate the time spent. This has been a really nice way to spend my Friday morning, and I'm appreciative of the two of you and your investment in me today, and just your investment in the Boston ecosystem. Although I said the ecosystem is small in the beginning, I always meet someone new at every event that I do, and a big part of that reason is the two of you. So thanks for everything that you do, and I hope everyone enjoys their weekend ahead. It's gonna be great.
We hope the same. All right. Thanks for joining us,
Thanks,
everyone.
Gabe.
Cool.